Hello and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate. Today I am incredibly excited to welcome Jonathon Aslay to the show. Jonathon is a coach for women. Yes, you heard that right. He is a coach for women at Understand Men Now at jonathonaslay.com, and his podcast is What Would a Love Do? Jonathon, thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Jonathon, one of the things that I'm most excited about is I find that it's incredibly useful in learning and understanding about anything from somebody else's perspective. And since you work primarily coach women, I primarily work and coach men, that having this conversation is always very, very beneficial to everybody involved. So, and I'm going to take your silence for agreement.
Yes.
Okay. You recently did a podcast at your website, jonathonaslay.com, that was entitled "Men Need to Grow the F Up When Dating." And I want to preface this first. There was so much good stuff in this podcast that I would encourage everybody to go listen to it. It's incredibly useful, beneficial. There's so many nuggets, and we could get into each of them for probably an hour each. We're going to keep this to 30, 40 minutes, but please go visit your website and check it out. Your premise in Men Need to Grow the F Up When Dating in your podcast was you're looking to explore the deeper issues that face men from the eyes of love when it comes to dating, to be better understanding why so many people lack emotional maturity. And so my first question to you would be, why do you feel that men or both men and women lack so much emotional maturity these days?
Well, great question. Or, I mean, in the sense that, and I know the title was a little, controversial. I'll even call it a little clickbaity from the perspective of my audience as women, and my audience is incredibly frustrated in the dating, mating, and relating process, predominantly based on men's behavior. Now, their frustration is twofold. A, it's based on their own misconceptions about the expectation about the opposite sex, and also the lack of emotional maturity both men and women equally have. So even though it was titled, for men or regarding men, it's both equal to men and women. And what I mean about emotional maturity is, it's one thing to be able to pay your bills on time and get to work on time or whatnot. But in relationship, oftentimes both men and women equally are myopic. They tend to be more focused on their own needs and not appreciating or understanding someone else's needs. And so from a dating premise, and especially divorced people in particular, is oftentimes men and women alike we have this desire to connect with another human being. We want companionship, we want connection, we want sex. And so many people enter into the dating process only being capable of just giving that much companionship, connection, and sex, but they're not capable of going deeper.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, correct? Depending if you communicate correctly to the other person.
Oh, sorry. So I'm going to say it is, because here's why. It used to be, like, I take someone like my mom and dad. My mom mated with one man her whole life. Okay. 66 years of marriage. Okay. Now we can have multiple partners, both sexual partners. And I don't mean actively, I'm just saying you're dating, you meet someone, you go out, you have a good time, you have sex, they break up with you, and then you're back out there doing it again and again and again. That's what I meant by that. I believe the emotional effects of multiple dating and multiple experiences can actually have a detrimental effect on our emotional state of being if we're not emotionally mature.
Sure.
So, and in particular women, because they tend to get more attached quicker than men, particularly because women bond through sex through a chemical release called oxytocin. So
Right.
I'm a little bit more protective of women in this particular case, hence the title was Men Need to Grow the F Up, because we don't bond in the same way as women do. So I'm here to just draw attention to this. And look, I'm not here to say I'm right or wrong. It's just I offer a perspective.
Sure.
But I do believe emotional maturity. So I did a podcast called The 5 Signs of Emotional Maturity. And maybe I should address that really quickly, and then we can kind of lean into this.
Okay.
But first is your actions match your words. Your action match your words. Oftentimes in the dating process, people say they called and they don't call, or they say they're going to do something and they're going to do something. And consistent, there's not with some people, it's one thing to, hey, look, I make a commitment, I bail on it. That's one thing. But if you're not consistent with your actions matching your words, to me, that's a person who lacks emotional maturity. And I see this consistency in the dating process, especially when men in particular go silent, they go dark, they pull away, that sort of thing. By the way, there's a reason for all these things, which I share in all my videos. I help women understand why men aren't consistent with their actions. But again, emotional maturity, you're going to be consistent. Number 2, you take personal responsibility for your choices. You take ownership of your choices. Both men and women alike, from a dating perspective, especially if they've gone through divorce, it's always the other person's fault why they got divorced.
Right.
A true emotionally mature person says, hey, I take ownership on my part. I'm not a victim here. I have victor consciousness. That represents emotional maturity. Number 3 is how to fight fair. It's what I call fighting fair, but it's healthy conflict resolution. Emotionally mature people aren't about being right. They're about being happy. Mm-hmm. So when you have conflicts, it's about hearing the other person's point of view, accepting their point of view, having them hear your point of view, and accepting your point of view. And if there's a disagreement, it's simply you agree to disagree. We each are entitled to our point of view, but emotionally immature person is they're right and you're wrong. Fourth, is empathy. And empathy isn't just the ability to feel someone else's feelings. Empathy means I care about your feelings. And oftentimes when people are myopically dating, men and women alike, they only care about their own feelings. Like I said earlier, they want to be right, or they blame everyone else.
Right.
And then lastly is transparency, the ability to be transparent with your feelings. And I did another podcast called when it comes to men, feelings aren't facts. And that's because women will hear a man share, I'm in love with you, and they hear for the rest of their lives, and he just meant it just for today.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying it doesn't mean for the rest of your life, but feelings, what we feel today can always change. So transparency is being as open and honest with your feelings when it comes to the other person. So why I'm saying all this, and I know you mostly work with men, and I'm sure you work with upstanding guys who are, good people, but oftentimes men in particular aren't very, I believe at least I'm a believer of being protective of someone else's feelings.
Sure.
In respects to how you operate with them.
Right.
And I hope I'm making sense here.
No, absolutely. We are both on the same page as far as being focused on dating and having intention around dating. The only reason I said originally that, that's not necessarily a bad thing is if you are intentional and you are clear and communicative about why you might be dating. So if you're just dating to date, it's okay to be clear and upfront about that with a woman, and it's okay for a woman to be clear and upfront with a man about that. We're adults, and as long as you are clear and upfront. Now, I prefer, like I believe that you prefer, to be focused for a reason why. Why am I dating? What is my intention around dating, and how does that move forward? So that I feel is the best way, because like you said, dating over and over again, it becomes you're almost attaching baggage to yourself, continuing to date without a specific intention as to
Yeah.
if you want to come together, blend like for many of my clients want to blend a family, want to find somebody that they can model a healthy relationship with, again in a family atmosphere. And so if you're doing that, you're clear, it's good. And it feels to me what you just described as your 5 points, that when people aren't on that, some of that feels like it's a function of society. It's not just men doing that poorly or women doing that poorly, but that the emphasis has not been, those 5 points were golden, but there has not been an emphasis on those 5 points to men and women when dating. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, people date very, as I said earlier, myopically or unconscious, from the perspective of, because we were never taught this stuff. We were never trained. We weren't educated on emotional maturity. We weren't educated on how to be in a healthy, happy relationship. Women's role models tend to be Disney and the Disney movies and The Notebook, and guys, it's the porn that they watch.
Yeah.
I'm being blunt when I say that.
Sure. No, it's the truth.
That's about the extent of where men learn how to have sex, or
Yes.
at least young boys do. So it's very dysfunctional. And let me tell you where this all came about. After going through a divorce, and look I've been through family court, visitation rights, custody, alimony, child support. I've been through it all. And what was interesting to me was when I sat in family court and I was listening to the other, for anyone who's been in court, which I had to go once, was we were fourth on the docket. So I heard 3 other cases before it got to ours. And when you listen to the divorce cases, you're in shock of what's going on between couples. So it got me thinking, what causes most divorces? Like, if you have to really think, like, if you looked into what causes divorces, well, how about re-engineering that to how to create a great relationship? And that's where my coaching kind of began, was looking what causes people to break up and say, how can we make it so this doesn't happen?
That's brilliant.
And this is why I'm a huge proponent of the book 8 Dates by Dr. John Gottman. For those who, I'm going to repeat again, 8 Dates by Dr. John Gottman, because he laid same premise. He figured out what most people break up over. So why not learn how to be in a healthy, happy relationship before you ever put yourself out there? That's my premise anyway.
And I agree with that 100%. We'll put that link to, in 8 Dates. 8 Dates by who?
By Dr. John Gottman.
John Gottman. And I'd like to add another book to that. It's called The Power of Commitment by Scott Stanley, who's a professor at the University of Denver. And he basically studied exactly what you're describing. And what his premise was, or what his conclusion was, is that people slide and don't decide about their relationships. So they just kind of backslide into the relationships and kind of just go along without being intentional.
It's funny. I just did a podcast called Men Fall in Love Through Dumb Luck.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's literally what you're just describing. From what I've been told, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? So that's what luck is. So, well, men do no preparation at this stage in their life. Again, I'm mostly focused on midlife folks. So that's
Sure.
After baby making years and before retirement. So that the group of guys over 40, but it's like, if you haven't prepared for it, how can you get lucky in love? So my premise is to understand, again, what's the mechanics of a healthy, happy relationship. But let's take this a step further, because remember, when I'm talking to my female clientele, I'm not here to bash men whatsoever. In fact, I'm here to draw attention to something deeper. And I continually, whether it's my YouTube videos or my podcasts, I talk extensively about human beings' negative patterns and limiting beliefs in their adult life are stem from childhood wounds and traumas or adult traumas.
Yes.
Childhood wounds and traumas or adult traumas. So most folks have spent very little time healing childhood wounds and traumas or adult traumas. And the biggest adult trauma tends to be divorce. It's a very traumatic emotional experience because not only are you trying to unravel the tapestry of an old life, it might be adversarial, which can affect one's nervous system and emotional well-being. So
Yes.
if there isn't, and so I wrote a book called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? And it's a journey of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work so one can heal or begin the healing process, because there's an old saying, how can you love another if you don't love yourself?
Yeah.
Well, self-love is like putting on the oxygen mask on the airplane. And, you have children, I have children. What does the flight attendant say? Put the mask on yourself first, because if you don't, you're no good to anyone else. And
Right.
that's what self-love is. It's an oxygen of love for oneself. So I'm a big proponent of doing work before you put yourself out there.
Well, and you mentioned in your podcast, learn about yourself and what you want before you get out into the dating world. And that's some advice that I share with divorced men, because when you get out of a relationship, you're kind of uncertain. There's a grieving process that goes, there's a whole process that goes along with divorce for men that I'm sure is in some respects similar for women, but I also think is very different in some respects too. But I agree with that in taking the time, and there's no hard and set time, but really taking the time. I usually say at least 1 year, because you go through all the holidays, you go through learning how to then parent or co-parent and pickups. And it's just a complete different change in lifestyle that you really need to get used to, let alone the emotional and mental changes that you're going through before you start dating.
But here's the dilemma. And by the way, I'm in full agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I didn't follow. By the way, the advice I give, I didn't practice because I learned it the hard way.
Neither did I.
I was a train wreck after my divorce, and I was addicted to online dating.
Mm-hmm.
I had over 100 internet dates my first year out of my divorce.
Wow.
And I was a train wreck. I was an emotional wreck. So going back to this premise of, we have to figure out what we want, and how do you do that? By what you don't want. So this is the catch-22, because I'm sure I left a wake of some, I said a wake of women who were very hurt that I wasn't able to go the distance with any of them.
Yeah.
And yet I wasn't capable of it. And I was honest, even though the fact I was honest, women are beautiful beings. They're such nurturers. They're enablers, and they want to take care of you. And thankfully I wasn't a jerk or a jackass. In my particular case, many men are, not all, but many. So it's really going back to emotional maturity, as I said before, is caring about someone else's feelings. And that's what I feel like is one of the biggest shifts for me. Was I did leave a wake of a lot of, I don't like using the word hurt, but how do I say it better?
Unfulfilled?
Well, yeah, thank you. That sounds kinder than the way I was thinking of it.
I mean,
yeah,
it can be emotionally unfulfilled, right?
Yeah, for some women, and in retrospect, if I could go back in time, I wished I didn't do that. But nonetheless, hey, they're on their own journey too, just like I am, and everyone listening to this. So, the idea, again, if I had one theme, I'd love for everyone to take away from whether it's this podcast or all my work is, I'm a huge proponent of daily personal development, self-help, and spiritual work as a way to create inner peace. And that's what I advocate over and over and over again.
Give us some examples of that and ways to create that environment in our lives.
Oh gosh, I mean, we don't have enough time here today.
Sure, just a
So
few quick points. I always liked we're
sure.
talking
No,
about
no,
a
I
lot of
know. I was being.
esoteric things, and I always like to give some real specific pointers to men, that because men are action oriented and need to be action oriented, frankly. So giving a few ideas of what that can be within the context of what you just described.
I'm going to take a couple chapters from my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? And chapter one is really simple. Speak your truth, do it with kindness. And what that really means is our truth is just really how we feel about something. We all have our own truths, and our truths aren't absolute, but in many people's cases, that's how they feel about their truths. But here's the thing, when you're interacting with someone and you have something to share, just do it with kindness,
Sure.
recognizing that the other person, there is a receiver at the other end of your message. And I'm here to encourage that consciousness of kindness. Um, that would be one.
I think that's a great message just in general, because we turn on the TV, we read the newspaper, and that seems to be something that is sorely lacking in general right now. So I love that.
Another one, thank you. Another one, and I said this earlier, is take responsibility for your choices. You are not a victim, you're a victor. But boy, we are sucking on the nipple of victimhood here in the United States. I mean, we are just riddled with nothing but victims. It's always somebody else's fault. And I'm here to say, I don't care what happened in your life, take ownership of it.
Yes.
Now, I'm not here to suggest that somebody who wasn't legitimately, injured by another human being maliciously is not a victim, but I'm more about the emotional victim consciousness that we are plagued here. So,
Sure.
My chapter says you take ownership of your choices. Even if you don't think you're wrong, you own your part in it.
And you always have the choice of how you respond.
Yeah. The other thing is I've learned is things happen for you, not to you. This goes back to the victim consciousness. Things are happening for you all the time. So you have a choice. You can be a victor in your life, or you can be a victim.
I love that. That is one of my favorite sayings that in the last 5 years has completely changed my mindset. Instead of, and I just want to talk about this for a few minutes because it was transformational for me, because everything that happened was always like, the Charlie Brown mentality. Oh, why is this happening to me? Or good grief. And when I started to shift that paradigm and that thought process to, wow, and thinking back, wow, this is happening for me, because if this didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And I connected the dots back to so many different things, and then began utilizing a mindset of when something that I perceived as bad or negative happened, to say, this is happening for me. So what is it that is, in my best interest going forward, that I'll be able to learn or utilize from this? It was absolutely transformational.
Yeah.
Great point.
I know that and that's, you brought up the connect the dots, when we look back on our lives, and I've had some terrible things happen in my life. I lost a $250,000 job at one point. I went through a divorce. I've had a few other things. And interestingly enough, everything that was bad had a silver lining to it. So on some level, now that's partly because I didn't choose to go into victim consciousness. So,
right.
So those are just a couple things from my book that I recommend. Again, my book goes into greater detail about. And by the way, for those that are listening and you think of the word self-love, sometimes that's a turnoff. I get it because it sounds woo-woo and whatnot. But an easier way of interpreting it: self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-reliance, self-discipline. Boy, we are lacking in self-discipline here in the United States.
Oh my, yes, absolutely.
So, and by the way, going back to self-discipline from a dating perspective, biologically, we men are driven by that need to connect on a physical level.
Right.
So self-discipline says you know what? I'm going to honor that there's another person here. I'm going to be respectful of their feelings. And even though I have my needs I want to be met, I'm going to be respectful and honor theirs as well.
Right. And on that point, let's talk a little bit. You talked in their podcast about masculinity and femininity, and we only got about 5 minutes left, so we're not going to be able to delve too deeply into this, but it's something that I talk about often, which is those dynamics. And when we talk about the masculinity and we talk about the femininity, we're not talking about how you dress, or I'm not speaking about how you dress or how you act. I'm talking about the energy that you bring to the table. And it's different. It's not your parts. I think you mentioned that also, which is something that I bring up often as well. But it is that masculine and feminine energy. And, you stated the masculine and feminine conversation doesn't matter 80% of the time because the population is unaware of themselves or wounded. But speak to a little bit of the masculinity and the femininity and what you just spoke about in understanding that, number one, the person across from you, you don't, or anybody that you meet, you don't have to scratch too far below the surface to know that everybody's going through something. And number two, that there is that masculine and feminine dynamic, and understanding that and appreciating that. And like you said, one of your points, having the empathy around that.
So
there was a lot there to unpack. Sorry.
No. Well, I'm just going to share for your audience, when I hear the word masculine and feminine energy, I want to stick my finger down my throat and throw up. I just am so fucking tired of this bullshit rhetoric, because it's the misconception around it all. Really simply put, masculine is doing and feminine is receiving. And if you want to be a healthy human being, you've got to do equal parts of both.
Absolutely.
So from a dating perspective, this doesn't mean a guy does all the work and a woman just sits back and receives because you allow the man to be the giver because that's what men are supposed to do. That's fucking bullshit. You know what? It's a 2-lane street when it comes to dating. It's not men doing, because what's the man's going to die because all he's doing is doing. Okay. And you're just sitting there fucking receiving. It makes me want to throw up. And then here's the thing. And what pisses me off most is a lot of times, especially women coaches coaching women about femininity or feminine energy, is they oftentimes use the terminology relating to controlling behavior as being masculine. Mm-hmm. And so it's all based on, it's just really just. Anyway, I'm about to lose my shorts here in a second.
Okay, I think I struck a nerve. It took me 27 minutes, but I got you worked up.
No, I got a few extra minutes. But my point is, here's the bottom line for anyone listening to this. Just be a human being. It's not about your penis or vagina. It's about being a good human being. Do you know what it means? And so what? Be a complete human being. And if it makes it simpler to think about it, you're an energetically both be masculine and feminine. I just prefer to think it as personhood. Okay. Sure. There's a great book called If the Buddha Dated. And why this is such a great book, it's dating from a spiritual perspective. It's not penis or vagina oriented. It's just show up present, conscientious, victor consciousness, emotionally mature, and it doesn't matter. Now, yes, guys to some degree take a little bit of the lead, but we don't do it anymore because we're no longer provider protectors as it once was in olden times. It used to be men asked for a woman's hand in marriage because he was going to agree to take care of her for the rest of her life. Well, we're not doing that anymore. So let's be real. Okay. It's a 2-lane street for a healthy, happy relationship. When you're both investing in it, then you're both going to get the riches from it.
Correct.
And so I'm very opinionated on this, and I'm not MGTOW in any sense or red pill or any of that other stuff. I'm just here, show up as a good human being and both show up with confidence and then go see where the relationship goes.
Absolutely. So let's leave it at that. And I think I think I see in the future another session, another show when we get together and talk about some of these misconceptions about that.
By the way, does this resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. Everything that you just said in those last few minutes absolutely resonates with me. And I just feel like there is, in speaking from the other end of the spectrum with men, there's just a huge amount of confusion around that. And I feel like we're in a time where it's uncertain. There's been so many changes. We won't go into the details, but you described something about the provider protector and the changes in how, men and women interact, and they're working together now more in different ways. And so there's a lot of confusion. I think we're in just this very confusing time for men and women. So if you would do me the honor, I'd love to have you back on, and maybe we talk a little bit about those misconceptions and maybe try to clear that up for as many people as we can with the limited understanding that you and I have, because I know that at least I don't have all the answers, but I've gone through a ton of this, and I feel a ton of this being a divorced father of 3 daughters. So that's a whole nother perspective, that adds into that masculinity and femininity and being the provider protector and dating and all of that. So it's really interesting and confusing at times.
It is so confusing, and everybody wants the fantasy that it just all magically works out because magic fairy dust is going to make all this work. And I'm here to say that I'm here to I'm here to just draw attention, and you take it from, not you, I'm saying the collective,
Sure.
If this perspective resonates with you, great. If not, hopefully I open you up to see something a different way.
Absolutely. And it's why it's helpful to have a coach or a therapist or somebody to talk to about this stuff, because they can look at this from a different place. So on that note, where's the best place for people to connect with you, Jonathon?
Well, a couple different places. I have my podcast called the What Would Love Do podcast, where we explore life, love, and the pursuit of inner peace through the eyes of love. I've got my YouTube channel, Jonathon Aslay, on YouTube. Certainly my website, jonathanaslay.com. And I'm on all the social media and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. So everybody, please go visit Jonathon Aslay's websites, YouTube channels, like them, subscribe, as well as mine at the Divorced Dadvocate podcast and on YouTube. Jonathon, thanks so much for being here today. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I had a great time.
Likewise. Take care.
Thanks.